Let me ask you something. What happens when the Church of God is paid to stay quiet? This story is not just about money. It's about what we choose to protect and what we choose to ignore. Hello, I am Kavovi, your storyteller. And this is African Folktales by Kavovi, where we don't just tell stories, we remember them. Let me tell you a story, my friend. A story about a man who could buy anything, even silence. Now, listen carefully. There's a place called Makongeni, a small village, the kind where the rooster's crow wakes you up, not your phone. People there were simple. Mamas wore headscarves, children ran barefoot, and old men walked with sticks and stories. But every Sunday, they all came to church. A sky blue church with cracked walls and a cross that leaned just a little to the side. The whole village came, but only one man arrived like a king. His name? Bwana Pesa. Pesa is the Swahili word for money. So his name? It means Mr. Money. You already know what that means, eh? He drove a big black car, so shiny it looked like he drank oil for breakfast. When the car stopped, dust flew everywhere like it was announcing him. Then, slowly, the door opened and out came Bwana Pesa. Gold agbada, white shoes that shined like someone polished them with the moon. He walked like the ground belonged to him. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen people bow? Not because they respect someone, but because they fear what he can take away? That's how it was. People didn't even look at him in the eye. They whispered, "Hey, that man is blessed." But one girl, just one, Amina, the choir girl, she looked away. Not with fear, but with pain. But inside the church, the front seat was already cleared for him, just for Bwana Pesa. No one else sat there. He walked up, placed a fat envelope on the altar. Not tithes, my friend, gifts. Big enough to fix the roof, repaint the church, and fill the pastor's fuel tank. Now, let me ask you again. When a man gives that much, can the church still tell him no? Well, behind the pulpit, Reverend Baraka stood. His voice shook a little. He said, "Today we thank God for those He has lifted. We do not ask how. We do not judge. We simply give thanks." What do you think, eh? Can you really praise a man and stay silent about what he's done? The church clapped. The choir sang. But outside, a scream broke through the hymns. People rushed to the gates. Amina had fainted. Her belly, big and round, shook as the women fanned her with handkerchiefs. And still, inside the church, Reverend Baraka looked out the window. He saw her. He saw the stairs. He saw the truth. But he turned the page of his Bible and said, "Let us continue. There is still much to praise." Amina didn't come back to the church after that day. She stayed home, quiet and hidden. The whispers didn't stop. Girls her age avoided her. Mothers looked at their sons and pulled them closer when she passed. Her uncle, the man she lived with, stopped talking to her. He just nodded and walked away. Then one evening, inside a small room lit by a kerosene lamp, she gave birth. It was a baby boy, healthy, loud, and alive. But something on the baby's face made Mama Talaka, the old midwife, pause. A birthmark, right above his left eyebrow. A dark swirl. Not just any birthmark, the same one Bwana Pesa's last-born son had. Mama Talaka stared at Amina. "Are you sure who the father is?" she asked. Amina nodded slowly. "He told me he'd take care of me. He said he would marry me once things cooled down." That same week, a car parked outside the church. One of Bwanapesa's drivers walked into Reverend Baraka's office and placed an envelope on the desk. "This is for the extension project," he said, "and for peace." The envelope was thick, much thicker than before. The next Sunday, Reverend Baraka stood at the pulpit, hands on his Bible. He didn't mention Amina. He didn't mention the baby. He only said, "Makongeni is a place of grace. We all stumble. We must forgive. We must move on." People nodded again. No one asked questions. That morning, at the very back of the church, Amina stood for a moment, holding her baby close. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her silence was louder than the sermon. Now, if you didn't think it could get worse, listen to this. Before the gold suits, before the church wall, there was Mama Nyaga. She was one of the oldest women in Makongeni. No husband and no children. Just her land and her tea kiosk under the acacia tree. She boiled sweet potatoes every morning, sold tea in tin cups. Her land wasn't big, but it had been in her family for generations. Then one morning, as the dew still clung to the mango leaves, trucks came. First one, then another, then the bulldozer. Men in orange overalls jumped out. They started marking the ground with white chalk. Mama Nyaga came out holding her lasso around her waist. "What is this?" she asked. "Who told you to draw on my land?" One man didn't even look up. "This land now belongs to Bwanapesa. You are paid." "Paid? When? I never sold anything." Another man pulled out a paper. "Your thumbprint is here." She squinted at it. "That's from last year. I was sick. I thought it was clinic medicine." But the bulldozers didn't stop. By sunset, her kitchen was gone. Villagers gathered. Some were angry, some were afraid. A camera crew stood nearby, filming everything. A reporter smiled and said into the microphone, "A generous businessman builds a shopping complex to boost Makongeni's economy." No one spoke to Mama Nyaga. The next morning, barefoot and trembling, she walked into the church. She waited until the last hymn ended. Then she stood in front of the altar and said, "They took my land. I have nowhere to sleep. I came here for help." Reverend Baraka looked at her. His voice was soft. "We will pray. Pray for peace." She stared at him. Her voice cracked. "Peace without justice is a lie." That night, her heart caught fire. People saw the flames from their windows, but no one called for help. 2 weeks after the fire, something strange happened. The little church that had served Makongeni for years, the one with blue walls and a leaning cross, was suddenly getting a fence. Not just a fence, a tall, smooth, concrete wall, grey and silent. No one was told. No fundraiser, no meeting, no prayer. Just trucks, cement mixers, and young men building from dawn to dusk. People walked by and shook their heads. "Why now?" someone asked. "Maybe to keep out noise," said another. But deep down, everyone knew. That wall wasn't built to keep trouble out. It was built to keep truth from getting in. Then one morning, people woke up and saw something new. On the eastern side of the wall, in thick red paint, someone had written, "What shall it profit a church to gain gold and lose its soul?" The letters dripped like fresh blood. People stopped and stared. No one said a word. By evening, it was gone, painted over in plain grey. The message was covered but not forgotten. That night, behind the church, a small group of young believers gathered. No lights, just whispers. They sat in the dark, backs against the wall that used to be open sky. One of them asked, "If the church fears the truth, who will speak for the people?" No one answered. But that question hung in the air, heavy and sharp like a knife, wrapped in silence. And in the pastor's office, the next envelope sat on the desk, bigger than the last, still unopened. Everyone in Makongeni knew Bonapesa's son was getting married. The wedding was loud before it even happened. White tents filled the big field near the church. Flowers from Nairobi, music from Mombasa. The whole village came, but only to watch from behind a rope. They were not the guests. They were background. The bride arrived in a white dress. 5 SUVs followed behind her. The groom, Kevin, wore a suit that didn't even look comfortable. Cameras rolled, drones flew in the sky, and Reverend Baraka stood at the altar, smiling for the pictures. Then came the vows. Just as the bride reached out her hand, crack, a sharp sound. Then a platform behind them broke. Something long rolled out of the decorations. A coffin. Yes, a real one. Wooden, heavy. Hey, let me tell you. The lid popped open. Inside was the body of an old man dressed for burial. Where? The screams. The bride fainted. The groom froze. Everyone whispered, "This is not a mistake." They said the coffin was meant for a funeral nearby. The delivery team got confused. But Makongeni doesn't believe in accidents like that. Even the dead are speaking, an elder muttered. People rushed quietly. The music stopped. The food was never served. By sunset, the tents were empty. The only sound left was the wind and the buzzing of flies around untouched cake. And Bonapesa? He sat alone in the back seat of his car. He didn't speak, because even he couldn't pay to explain away a coffin. After the wedding, nobody talked, but everybody remembered. A coffin at a wedding, Bonapesa's wedding. The videos disappeared online. The bride went back to the city. Even Kevin, the groom, left Makongeni without saying goodbye. But one person stayed, Amina. For months, she had kept quiet. She walked with her baby, kept her head down. But that coffin, that one moment, had opened something inside her. The next Sunday, Amina came to church. She wore a simple green dress. Her baby was wrapped tightly against her chest. She didn't sit in the back. She walked straight to the altar. Everybody stared. Even Reverend Baraza froze. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just spoke. "I came to this church when I was hurting. I was young, alone, carrying shame that didn't belong to me." She looked around. No one asked me what happened. No one stood with me. But someone gave envelopes. And the church fell silent. People looked down. If I had money, would you have believed me? If I dressed like a queen, would I still be called a disgrace? No one answered. The baby in her arms began to move, eyes wide. This child is not a mistake. He is not shame. He is truth. The truth doesn't need a title. It only needs to be heard. She stepped down and walked out. The door swung gently behind her. No one clapped, no one moved. But her words stayed in the room like smoke after a fire. That day, the silence in Makongeni became heavier than ever before. It all started with one photo, Amina at the altar holding her child. Someone had taken the picture on their phone. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't planned, but the image said everything. By evening, the photo was on people's phones. By morning, it was on the news. No hashtags, no filters, just truth. Then came the noise. Investigations, news reporters, government letters. Bwana Pesa's name, once spoken with pride, was now whispered with shame. They froze his bank accounts. They blocked his construction projects. Even the men who once called him boss started calling their lawyers. The news dug deeper. Bribes hidden in donations, fake land deals, names on papers who never signed. And worst of all, a video. Amina Yanga sitting in his office, eyes scared, voice shaking. Him leaning back, smiling, making promises with words she never wanted to hear again. The people of Makongeni were stunned. The question was no longer, is he guilty? It became, how deep does this go? But the church, still quiet, no statement, no apology. And Reverend Baraka? He stopped preaching. He barely came out of his office. He walked like a man who couldn't find his shadow. But the village had changed. Makongeni had finally seen what silence had cost them. The church was full that Sunday, but no one sang. There was no music, no announcements, just a pulpit and waiting. Reverend Baraka walked in slowly. No robe, no collar, just a plain grey shirt. His Bible tucked under his arm like it was too heavy to carry. He didn't go straight to the pulpit. He paused, as if asking permission from the air. Then he looked at the people and he said, "Forgive me." There was silence. He cleared his throat, but his voice still cracked. When I came to this church, I wanted to serve God. That's all. But then came the envelopes. Small ones at first, then bigger. I told myself it was for the church, for the roof, the fence, the fuel. He paused. But every time I took money, I gave away something else. His hands shook. I stood here and told you to forgive, but I was protecting the one who caused the pain. I hid behind scripture. I kept quiet when I should have spoken, because deep down, I was afraid of going back to poverty. He then looked at Amina. She didn't nod, she didn't cry. She just watched. Reverend Baraka pulled a ring of keys from his pocket and placed it gently on the altar. I am not leaving God, but I'm stepping down from this pulpit. I do not deserve it. And just like that, he walked out. No choir followed him, no applause. But something in the room shifted. The church had been quiet for a long time. This time, the silence felt clean. Bwana Pesa's world didn't fall in one day. It fell piece by piece, quietly. First, the banks froze his accounts. Then the title deeds were taken. The land, the apartments, the offices, all under investigation. His name no longer opened doors. It closed them. His workers stopped showing up. His phones stopped ringing. The same people who once bowed now passed him like he was dust on their shoes. His wife picked up her things and left. His son Kevin moved to another country and changed his number. The mansion grew quiet. The grass grew tall. Even the dogs barked less. Then came the final blow. He tried to run. One early morning, he slipped into the airport. Fake name, one suitcase and a ticket to anywhere but here. But just before boarding, he stepped into the restroom and collapsed. No warning, no noise, just his body hitting the cold tile floor. A stroke. Where? He survived. But he never walked again, never spoke again. They brought him back to Makongeni in a wheelchair, with a nurse who fed him soft porridge and wiped drool from his chin. Every morning, they sat him near the gate. He would face the church, the same church where he once sat in the front row, shining like gold. Now, he stared, mouth open, eyes wide, trapped in a body that couldn't speak. And you know what people said? He used money to silence others. Now silence had taken him. The wall still stood, tall, grey, quiet. But inside, something had changed. The pulpit was no longer a stage. It became a place of truth. No suits, no special seats, no envelopes. And one Sunday, the congregation stood and watched Amina walk to the front. This time, not to protest, not to plead, but to lead the choir. She wore a simple white dress. Her voice was clear. Her baby boy Tumaini sat in the front pew, smiling at his mother. The same boy who once represented shame, now reminded the village what courage looked like. Remember Mama Nyaga? Well, the land that was taken from her was returned. Her tea kiosk reopened under the old acacia tree. And this time, people sat longer, paid fairly and said, "Thank you." The village moved on, but not in a way people forget. They moved forward with memory, with meaning. And every morning across the street, Bwana Pesa sat in his chair, eyes open, mouth still. He watched the people he used to control walk into a church that no longer bowed to him. He could no longer speak, but now, at last, he listened. So, now you've heard it. A man who bought silence and ended up trapped inside it. Let this be a reminder. You can build walls, you can pass envelopes, but truth always finds a voice, even if it has to cry first. This has been one of my many stories I carry with me, told from the heart, by me, Kavovi, here on African Folktales by Kavovi. If something in this story made you pause, made you feel, or made you think, then don't keep that moment to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe, because there are more stories to come. And next time, come sit with me. Let's remember together.